This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. How can conservatives and progressives come together to reduce healthcare costs? Author Phillip Longman says simply, join forces to oppose the monopoly pricing power of hospitals. Harvard professor Theda Skocpol says mainstream Republicans are riding on the back of the Tea Party tiger, and they may soon regret it. And Bill Press talks with Congressman Keith Ellison, who says progressives should remain optimistic. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. No matter how well Obamacare may work, the administration is doing very little to enforce antitrust laws against hospitals, which drive up the price of medical care, says author and health analyst Phillip Longman.
And teaches health care policy at Johns Hopkins University. Phil Longman, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Regardless of the success or failure of Obamacare, America as a whole is paying more and more for health care and not getting very much for its money. How do you account for that?
Well, there are many factors involved, but one of them is just ordinary, simple inflation. We are paying more and more for the same procedure. So the MRI scan that cost $200 last year now costs $400. And why is that? Increasingly, it's because there's not any real competition left in various local healthcare markets. So we've had this rampant consolidation and mergers of hospitals, so that even of doctors themselves forming specialty group practices, so that basically it's the providers that are in the driver's seat for setting prices. Everybody else is a price taker, including insurance companies now in many markets. Basically just have to take the price of whatever the one remaining hospital system says is the appropriate price and pass that along to their customers. So that has been a source of substantial inflation. And unfortunately, it's not something that Obamacare by itself can fix. The administration is quite confused, in my opinion, about what its stance is about hospital mergers and consolidations, whether they're good or bad on a given day. Sometimes they seem to be encouraging more mergers, and other days they're actually suing people to get them to stop merging. But anyway, this is, I think, the new frontier in healthcare reform.
And you say that Americans actually consume less of most kinds of health care than Europeans do, but obviously are paying far more for the treatments they get.
Well, that's right. So Germans, for example, get as many, if not more, MRI scans per capita as Americans do. And yet they pay a fraction of what Americans do for the same MRI scans. And even within the United States, in those areas of the country where there still is competition between hospitals, communities where there's more than one hospital left, there's actual price competition. But more and more, there is no price competition, and so prices just go up and up. So the same procedure, a colonoscopy, prostate surgery, its price can change by an order of 5 to 10-fold, depending on what city you're in and depending on how consolidated the healthcare sector has become in that city.
In fact, I read an article recently, they used a specific, and I can't recall the exact procedure, but it was a heart procedure of some sort, and they picked 5 different cities and vastly different prices for the exact same procedure.
That's right.
Which doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and when you scratch beneath that fact and figure out, okay, well, what is accounting for that? It is the degree of consolidation. So to what extent are the hospitals and the various specialists, have they succeeded in combining and merging to the point where there is no alternative? Any insurance company that comes in just has to take their price. Any individual, God help any individual trying to negotiate on their own with a hospital, for a price. So that is what's happening, and the administration can't quite figure out what to do about that, because a lot of us in healthcare, think, and we know that there are many things about bigness in healthcare that are good. And part of what's wrong with the healthcare system in the United States is it's so fragmented. We have so many. Most of us have, all kinds of different specialists that are treating one body part at a time and not communicating with each other. It would be nice if they were all integrated and consolidated, working on the same team. So in that sense, bigness is good. And part of what is called Obamacare is our provisions that encourage healthcare providers to merge and become what they call accountable care organization, right? But if you have that and you don't combine it with any kind of antitrust enforcement or any sensitivity to what happens when people in any walk of life consolidate, monopolize, over time we're looking at a system that becomes quite inefficient, precisely because it is so monopolized.
And that's what we've seen in this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some parts more than others. And Northern California would be an area where it's unbelievably monopolized, right? Other parts of the country, not so much. But we have this extraordinary run-up in hospital mergers over the last few years, and there's no sign of that abating. So you don't always notice this. In my own backyard here in Washington, D.C., we still have little suburban hospitals that have the same name on them that they've always had. But turns out, they're all owned by Johns Hopkins University.
Right. Right.
So any insurance company or large employer that comes into this community and wants to negotiate for better prices or higher quality in healthcare they have to sign a contract with this one remaining healthcare provider, and they have to pay the price that healthcare provider says is the price. So Adam Smith, nowhere in the Wealth of Nations said that free markets work when prices are secret and monopolies rule, and that's what we have in healthcare today. And it's actually something that both liberals and conservatives can come around together for, because even the most hardcore economic fundamentalists don't believe that monopolized markets work or can work without serious regulation.
In fact, we have rules for that.
Right. So the word monopoly. I did a look on Wealth of Nations. I had a digital copy. I think it's something like 400 times that Adam Smith unveils against monopoly in the Wealth of Nations. So there's just no reason to think that monopolized healthcare system in the United States is going to work in the absence of some kind of serious regulation.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Phillip Longman, senior editor of Washington Monthly, senior research fellow at the New America Foundation, and also teaches healthcare policy at Johns Hopkins University. So, do we need a system where private insurers or the government will pay for only those treatments that are proven to work?
Well, that would be nice.
Maybe that was too big a dream.
Yeah. Sadly, in the fine print of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, are provisions inserted there by conservative forces that make it illegal for the United States government to actually engage in research on the cost effectiveness of different procedures. The drug companies were scared to death that some actual science might be performed about how effective different drugs are compared to one another. So they got that, outlawed. Standard estimates are that somewhere between 20 and 30% of all healthcare spending in the United States is for procedures that do not benefit patients and that often harm them. So and we have just tremendous variations in practice patterns across the United States. So some places, if you're 14 and you have a sore throat, chances are you're going to get your tonsils out. In other places, there's very little chance of that. And so how we treat specific diseases, specific conditions, is not based on science in practice, and there's incredibly little science behind the actual practice of medicine. Scarily, Federal Drug Administration will look into whether a drug outperforms a placebo, but not whether it's better than some other drug. So, to answer your question, yeah, it'd be nice to have more science in healthcare.
I mean, that's an incomplete test. That's an incomplete experiment. That makes less sense than some of the other stuff we've been talking about.
Right. Well, a common sense example is this. One of the most common complaints in America, in the world, is lower back pain, right? And
yeah.
There basically is no definitive science now, or maybe just recently there is, but for years and years and years, decades, right? There has been basically no studies to say what is the most effective treatment for lower back pain. Would it be physical therapy, or would it be this or that surgery, right? And that would be an elemental thing, you would think, right?
Absolutely.
But right, knee surgery, stents for hearts, and now that some of this research is coming in, we're finding out that most stent operations in the United States, for example, don't benefit patients. Most back surgeries in the United States don't benefit patients, or don't benefit them as much as would appropriate physical therapy. Or, in the case of heart disease, don't benefit them as much as would taking an aspirin every day, or some other much less invasive type treatment. So, this is part of.
It seems like we're spinning out of control as far as the cost and trying to reel this stuff in. I mean, in fact, along the lines of whether you should do a procedure or not, something else I heard recently was a study that was done where patients that had knee pain, some of them went through knee surgery and some of them didn't, but were told they had gone through the knee surgery.
Right. Yes.
And they were fine.
Yes.
That's
the placebo effect applies to surgery too. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Phil, before we let you go, even if Obamacare survives the Republican attacks, but prices don't go down, won't Democrats be blamed? And then if on the other side, if Republicans were to kill Obamacare, how can they benefit politically? Well,
my argument to both parties is you all got to get with the program here, because for the Democrats, it's sort of Pottery Barn rules now. We own the healthcare system as far as the American people are concerned. So from now on, anything that goes wrong with the healthcare system, the Democrats will get blamed for it, right? It's just all because of Obamacare. Not fair, but that's how people will look at it. For the Republicans, right, if their stance is, well, we're just against Obamacare, but we don't have any alternative, that won't last. I mean, that won't be credible. And the typical family now is paying 35% of its income on healthcare costs, right? And even at today's moderating healthcare inflation numbers, that goes up to 70% of household income, in 20 years. So that's just completely unsustainable. And the Republicans will have to seriously address the issue of the price of healthcare and the provision efficiency of healthcare, which is a conversation we have by and large managed to avoid so far.
Man, that kind of money, from a family, it doesn't lead to much of a retirement.
No.
When you're spending all that money all those years, you're not saving a whole lot.
No, and if you wonder how come it's so much harder for you to get ahead than maybe it was for your parents, right? This is the overwhelming explanation. The per capita cost of healthcare in the United States in 1964 was $175. Right? Which even after adjusting for inflation is like, I don't know, $400 today, right?
Right.
Here you have a family of four paying $22,000 a year on health care. And by the way, at $22,000 a year, even when you have as we did last year, a healthcare inflation number that comes in at like 4.15%, that's almost $1,000 out of the pocket of the typical American family. Now, sadly, most people don't see that money going. They don't pay or don't write a check for their own health care costs. You know, they get it through their employer, so they don't realize that when that $900 is going to come out of the raise they would have gotten next year, right? The employer says, well, you know what, I have to pay so much more for health care costs. I can't pay as much for wages, and that's how this system works. But this is the single greatest force of downward mobility in the United States today. I mean, there's just nothing else that can compare to it. I mean, most of us are not subject to direct competition from foreign manufacturers, for example, right? If I was an auto worker, I could say maybe the source of my downward mobility was some other auto plant on the other side of the earth, but all of us, whatever sector of the economy are paying this healthcare tax, and it has now grown to such proportions. It is enough to mean that, you know, we can't afford to send our kids to college, or we can't afford to finance our own retirement, and like that. So it's a real bread and butter issue, and I think that's the way we should work this issue going forward.
And I have a feeling this will not be the last time we talk about it. Phil Longman is a senior editor of Washington Monthly, a senior research fellow at the New America Foundation, and teaches healthcare policy at Johns Hopkins University. Phil, thanks so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, you too. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. The Tea Party takeover of the GOP may be great news for Democrats, says Harvard professor Theda Skocpol, but it's not good for the country, and we'll hear from her in just a minute. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
The rich truly are different from you and me. They tend to become Congress critters. You don't find many plumbers, mine workers, dirt farmers, Walmart associates, beauty parlor operators, taxi drivers, or other get-the-job-done Americans among the 535 members of the U.S. House and Senate. What you do find is an oversupply of lawmakers drawn from a very thin strata of America's population, millionaires. The Center for Responsive Politics reports that last year, for the first time in history, more than half of our senators and House members are in the Millionaires Club. Indeed, the average net worth, the value of what they own minus what they owe, for all lawmakers now totals more than $7 million each. The world in which our representatives live is light years from where the majority of people live, and the divide between the governors and the governees is especially stark for the 40% of people whose net worth is zero, or technically less than zero, since their income and other assets are far exceeded by their debts. This widening chasm is not just a matter of wealth, but most significantly, a literal separation of the privileged few from the experiences, needs, and aspirations of the many, who are struggling to make ends meet and worried that opportunities for their children to get ahead are no longer available to them. This is Jim Hightower saying, the harsh reality is that most Americans are no longer represented in Washington. Chances are that their own members of Congress don't know any struggling and worried people, share nothing in common with them, and can't relate to their real-life needs. Thus, Congress is content to play ideological games with such basics as health care, minimum wage, joblessness, food stamps, and Social Security. America's wealth divide has become a chasm, creating a looming social and political crisis for America that undermines any pretense that ours is a democratic society.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Theda Skocpol has studied the Tea Party's death grip on the Republican Party, and the Harvard professor says it's a pincers movement, applying pressure upward from the grassroots and downward from the big money interests.
And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Theda Skocpol is the Victor S. Thomas Professor of Government and Sociology at Harvard University, also serving as the director of the Scholars Strategy Network, and has written a recent article about the Tea Party's hold on the Republican Party. Professor, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
I'm glad to be here.
Before we go in and talking a little bit about Tea Party, can you tell us a little bit about, I mentioned you were the director of the Scholars Strategy Network. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks. It is a resource that stand-up Democrats should know about. It's a nationwide network, more than of 350 scholars in universities all over the United States, and we've got 15 regional networks too. And what people do is they prepare 2-page plain English briefs putting out facts on important topics in the public debate, like the Tea Party and the Affordable Care Act and its implementation, and elections and where they're headed, and women in politics, all of those kinds of issues. And they're all available on our website, scholarsplural.strategynetwork.org. And I think people would find that an important resource.
Scholarstrategynetwork.org. Okay, great information. Right. So is the Tea Party's hold on the GOP a death grip?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, I think it's pretty strong in the sense that candidates running in Republican primaries and legislators serving under the Republican label are very worried about being challenged by funders and extreme voters on their right. In states where Republicans are sure to be elected no matter what, that may not matter too much, but in states where the candidates in the general election have to appeal to independent-minded people and to Republicans who don't think of themselves as Tea Partiers, it is a problem for them.
A lot of observers thought the Tea Party got its comeuppance in the 2012 re-election of the president and the Republicans' failure in some prominent Senate races. But the Tea Party sure looked pretty powerful when it shut down the government. Is that because Republican leaders were still terrified of being primaried?
Yeah, and I think that remains true. I mean, we're seeing a little bit more pushback now from John Boehner in the House and the Republican leadership, and from some business-affiliated groups that realize that the Republican Party is not going to do as well in Senate elections or presidential elections if Tea Partiers are pushing them always to no compromise and extreme right stands. But there's still a lot of people in Congress who are very worried about being challenged on their right.
How much did getting that budget deal done help the Republican establishment against the Tea Party?
A little bit, and I don't think they're going to close the government down again. But let's keep in mind here that over the last several years, the sort of extreme stands on the budget that Republicans have been taking in Congress have moved things very far to the right. The budget deal it was good to have it done, but it doesn't really embody Democratic Party priorities very much.
Now, you did research a couple of years ago into the formation and ideology of the Tea Party. Was it really ever about economic conservatism, or was it more a collection of people who had grievances against various social programs?
Well, it's important to remember that the Tea Party isn't just one thing. We all say the Tea Party, and I think it's a phenomenon that's pushing Republicans. But it consists of grassroots groups of very conservative-minded, older white Republican voters who in some ways are probably more worried about immigration and blocking immigration reform that would have a path to citizenship. But they're also very concerned that they not have to pay taxes for social programs like affordable care that they think of as going to undeserving people, lower income people, immigrants. They're convinced that illegal immigrants get benefits, even though that's not true, and they resent giving benefits to younger people too. So that's the grassroots. Now at the elite ranks, when we're talking about these funding groups that fund challengers or back people like Ted Cruz, that would be the Koch brothers and Americans for Prosperity and other kind of right-wing billionaire back groups, and their major concern is to get rid of things like Social Security and Medicare, and certainly to block affordable care and to reduce taxes and regulation on business and to block all action on climate change. They don't have exactly the same priorities of the grassroots, and some of them actually would like to see some kind of immigration reform.
Mm-hmm. How do you account for the fact that so many people who identify themselves as Tea Partiers get so many of the government benefits that they complain about? I mean, are they rationalizing their benefits as deserving and everybody else's benefits as handouts? I mean, there's... Yes,
and, here I want us all to maintain some perspective. I mean, Tea Party people are older folks for the most part at the grassroots, and they are often collecting or about to collect Medicare, Social Security, or military veterans benefits. They think that they've earned those benefits as hardworking Americans over their lives, and in that sense, they agree with almost everybody else in America. I mean, that's a view that 75 to 90% of people hold about those kinds of benefits. And from the Tea Party perspective, they don't see any contradiction, and they don't think it's hypocrisy that they believe they're getting benefits from government that they've earned, whereas they don't want to pay for benefits that they think would be going to people who haven't earned them.
We're speaking
That's how they feel about it. That's, I'm not endorsing that, but that is how they think about it.
We're speaking with Theda Skocpol, professor of government and sociology at Harvard University, and talking a little bit about the Tea Party and their hold on the Republican Party here on americasdemocrats.org. Apart from the grassroots element from which the Tea Party sprang, there is a larger, more potent force behind them, and that is the big money, fierce anti-government, pro-business lobby led by the Heritage Action, the Club for Growth, Koch brothers. Who's really in charge when it comes to the Tea Party?
Well, that's the wrong question to ask, with all due respect. The Tea Party is a pincers movement, and it includes both genuine grassroots activists who are pushing from below and big money, ultra free market advocates who are pushing from above. And it is not organized in any one organization that anybody controls. The bottom-up parts and the top-down parts kind of leverage each other, and together they push on the Republican Party. And it would be easier to deal with it, especially for the Republican leaders, if there was one big organization they could have a bargain with. But it's wrong to think that grassroots Tea Partiers are all getting checks from the Koch brothers. They're not. And actually, the whole thing is more potent and more uncontrollable because there isn't one center of organizational authority.
So is there an argument for it being too fractured to last a long, long time?
Well, let's go back to the 2012 election, where the fractured nature, the fact that it's really a field of organizations pushing from above and below on the Republican Party, that hurt the Tea Party's chance to nominate a candidate for president. And you remember we saw all those Tea Party forces, both the funders and the grassroots, desperately searching for an alternative to Mitt Romney because they don't like Mitt Romney.
Right.
Mitt Romney, meanwhile, was busy endorsing all of their ideas so that he could somehow try to make them think he was a Tea Partier when they don't think he's a Tea Partier. But there is a difference going into 2016, and that would be Ted Cruz. The government shutdown episode this fall was a debacle for the Republican Party, and it probably discredited tactical ideas from Tea Partiers with some of the kind of middle-of-the-roaders in the House of Representatives. But what it did do was allow Senator Ted Cruz to kind of get himself visible nationally. And he's extremely popular with the grassroots Tea Partiers who vote in Republican primaries, and he's also backed by some of the big money groups. So he's going to go into 2016 in a very strong position to kind of gather up all those far-right votes.
He sounds so. I mean, the way you paint that, it kind of makes him sort of the perfect storm for the representation of the Tea Party.
He's a lot better kind of a symbol that could assemble support from above and below on the far right than, say, Michelle Bachmann, because Ted Cruz is smart. He's also, completely ruthless and willing to do just about anything, which actually thrills a lot of people in the Tea Party. And he's a demagogue, of the first order, who now has national name recognition and popularity with Tea Partiers. During the whole government shutdown episode, his popularity just shot up on the far right.
Isn't that something? But but it also makes him a bigger target from the left.
Yeah, he's useful to everybody. But I'm just saying that could easily make him, let's say, that could make him a threat to somebody like Chris Christie in the Republican primaries in 2016.
Do you think the establishment Chamber of Commerce Republicans are riding a tiger that they dare not dismount?
Well, they know that now, and they're making some feeble efforts to rein the tiger in, but, they've willingly ridden this since Barack Obama moved into the White House, thinking to some degree correctly that if they riled up a lot of fear and anger in the Republican base, that they would be able to win elections. They won big in 2010, and frankly, it's not easy to undo those victories from 2010. Democrats are really smarting from that and still will be for quite some time, unless Democrats turn out to vote in big numbers in the 2014 midterm elections. But I think that the government shutdown this fall really alarmed the Chamber of Commerce types because they thought this was all rhetoric, and then they realized, well, no, it isn't.
Right.
And I think a fair number of business interests, including even some, the Koch brothers fall into this category, not Heritage Action, but the Koch brothers, they would like immigration reform. They don't really care about the ethnicity of the workers that they exploit, and so they don't like it that the grassroots of the Republican Party on the far right is blocking immigration reform.
That kind of goes back to the fractured question earlier.
There's not a complete agreement on the issues, but what they all do agree on is that they want to defeat Democrats and block Barack Obama.
Yeah, and probably more the latter than anything else. Should progressive Democrats then be thankful for some of the Tea Party shenanigans, or quite the opposite?
Well, I'm not one of these people who thinks that having extremists taking over one of the two major U.S. parties is good. It's not good for the country. Mm-hmm. Certainly they offer some juicy targets for progressive Democrats or for Democrats in general. But I think we have to remember just how much they've been able to do to block much-needed government action across a whole range of areas. And they're still fighting to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. I don't think they're going to succeed, but they are blocking it in a bunch of states.
Yeah. Okay. Theda Skocpol is the Victor S. Thomas Professor of Government and Sociology at Harvard University, also serves as director of the Scholars Strategy Network. You can check out more on them. Their website, scholarsstrategynetwork.org. Professor, thank you very much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Okay, nice to be here.
Nice to have
Thank you.
And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats.
We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, Congressman and Progressive Caucus Chair Keith Ellison of Minnesota.
As we have said, we are the Progressive Caucus of the United States Congress this hour with Mark Pocan here from Wisconsin, and now the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota. Happy New Year. It's good to see you.
Happy New Year, Bill. Keep pressing on. Hey, that Pocan is something, isn't he?
He is. He's good.
I love that guy. He is what we're looking for.
And the special order yesterday on the minimum wage, led by a freshman member of Congress.
You know what? Mark is taking on the leadership mantle, and there are a lot of strong people in his class. Hakeem Jeffries, Steve Horsford, Matt Cartwright, Dan Kildee. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. I don't mean to, forgive me, but the bottom line is it's a strong group, and he is strong in that group, and so we're just grateful. I think that this the freshman class, it used to be that, okay, you're new, sit down, shut up, sit in the corner. Now we look at the freshman class as to bring us news from the front, if you know what I mean. They have been out there talking to the voters, have a very fresh look at what the country wants.
I asked Mark about this. I want to ask you too, Congressman. It must be a blow to you to see George Miller, Jim Moran step aside.
So those are two awesome progressives, know. But you know what the thing is that both of them have worked really hard for people and been very effective. And if they feel that it's time for them to seek other opportunities, I say to them, thank you for all you've done and best of luck, my brother, because that's why I'm so excited about a Pocan, because George Miller has done his good part.
Pass the torch, huh?
Right, that's it. And George Miller will be missed. He is he's the best. What do you want from him? But it's exciting to know that great leaders like George can retire in comfort knowing that we have some exciting new members.
And he can certainly be proud of his contribution.
Oh, absolutely.
As well.
Indispensable.
Now, we are glad to see you, and congratulations. Very, very exciting. A new book out, absolutely brand new this week, My Country, 'Tis of Thee, Congressman Keith Ellison. There you are.
That guy looks like me.
Man, look at that.
Yeah. This is your story. Tell us what's it all about.
It's about.
I just got it, so I haven't had a chance to crack it.
It's about our country. It's about the direction of our country. It's a book about my love of this nation, and my belief that we can scale higher heights than we have, and that some of the lowlights that we've seen in the past several years, don't define us. And that if we get in there, we stick and we stay, and we don't divide ourselves on religion and race and stuff like that, then the future is bright for America.
So you're still optimistic?
Absolutely. Because I believe that people really, look, the pessimists are the ones who are not realistic. If the pessimists were right, we'd still have slavery. If the pessimists were right, women wouldn't have the right to vote, and we never would have had a labor movement, and we never would have had an environmental movement. But the pessimists were wrong. And the people who were those hopeful optimists, who didn't have the facts in front of them, but who believed in a better day, who laid it on the line, like Martin Luther King, like LBJ, who, with the war on poverty, that was a visionary thing. Those people were right. And so that's what I'm saying in this book. In this moment, you're looking at these obstructionist Republicans. They're shutting down the government. They will refuse to cooperate with us on extending unemployment benefits and a whole host of other obstructionist things. But don't be fooled by the moment, because there's going to be another moment in a moment. And we've got to be prepared for it. And that means organizing, pulling together, sharing information, being optimistic. Pessimists don't win. Optimists do.
The book is My Country, 'Tis of Thee. It's available in bookstores as of this week, and we will put up a link on our website. Of course, you can get it through any of the websites, Amazon.com and others. And it is published by Simon & Schuster. So there you go.
Yeah. It talks about my own story. Like we all have a story, right?
I was going to ask you, yeah.
We all have a story. And I think that, when you add up all these stories, that's an American story. But my little piece of that story is I was born in the city of Detroit. I was born to two Southerners. My mother grew up in Natchitoches, Louisiana. When she walked to school every day, she walked past this huge statue. And it was a black man tipping his hat. And it said, in faithful memory of the good darkies of Louisiana. And that's the indignity she had to face as a child growing up.
Whoa.
But, like I'm her son, right?
Yeah.
So she grew up seeing that, but she did not let that define who she was or what her possibilities were.
Well, we first met you when you were running for Congress, right?
Yeah.
And, it wasn't that long ago, and you took a lot of heat, right?
Took a little heat.
Right, because you
Just a little bit.
just a little bit. First Muslim elected to Congress.
That's right.
And you could not be loyal to this country. You had to be pro Osama bin Laden.
Right.
I mean, all that
Star of
stuff.
one of the craziest clips I've ever seen, where Glenn Beck asked you point blank if you were working with the terrorists.
Yeah, that's
right.
what,
And that led
that's
to
what he
that.
wanted to know.
So do you still get any of that stuff, or have you? Put that
We
behind
get
you?
it. We get
Still?
it. Yes, we do. We do get it, and people who are Muslim all over this country get it. And I'm probably don't get it as much as average citizens say in the city of Dearborn.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just this week this guy. I think his name was Gemma. He's a member of the Republican National Committee, who had made some horribly intolerant comments about Muslims. But you know what? And right there in Dearborn, Michigan, and the people who live there have to put up with that, just like they had to put up with Terry Jones protesting them because they were Muslim, wanting to burn Qurans and stuff like that. But, in that case, there were more people who were Christian than Muslim who showed up in Dearborn to say, this is not us. And what I'm trying to talk about in the book is, look, throughout this country's history, we've had Bull Connor, but we also had Martin Luther King, right? Throughout this country's history, we had the intolerant people who wanted to make a state religion, but we also had Thomas Jefferson, who said, no, religion will be up to the individual American person. And so that's the thing. We have every reason to believe that if we organize and stick together and don't divide ourselves, that a better moment is in our store.
All right. Now I want you to help me out here. I want you to give me some of that optimism about this Congress getting something done on. Let's start with what Mark Pocan talked about last night, and you and others on the floor, of the minimum wage.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about something that's crying for change.
Well, let me just say that people should know that America's never been richer. If you look at our per capita, that means divided by the by the number of people in America, our gross domestic product per capita never been higher. Our offshore profits of American corporations are at record levels. American corporations are making all kinds of money.
More money than they ever did.
And yet, our minimum wage, when adjusted for inflation, is lower than it was in 1950. In fact, the goods and services that American workers create, they are not sharing in the bounty of. Yeah. The big corporations are sweeping the cream from the workers, and giving the workers nothing more than enough money to get back to work. And don't care about unemployment, because they know that if you tighten the labor market, reduce unemployment, that means you got workers who can demand higher pay and better working conditions, which is the last thing they want. They'd rather offshore the jobs to Vietnam, where the minimum wage is 30 cents. So what do we do? What's the reality? The cause of the raising the minimum wage is right, and it's just, it's logical. It'll help the American people, and we've got to mobilize. And so we will do two things if we mobilize. We will heighten we will let Americans know who's on their side, or we will win.
Yeah.
So we will either win, or we will reveal how much the Republicans do not look out for the average American worker. So we can't lose, actually, unless we sit around and cry and talk about how bad it is. That's the only way we lose. But if we are willing to throw our shoulder into it, even if we don't get the increase in minimum wage we want, and we will at least reveal to people for the next round of elections who really is for them and who really is not.
And I'm sure you pointed out last night that this has always been almost a no-brainer, right? Republicans and Democrats, they just do it.
No-brainer. Republicans have raised the minimum wage. Republicans have extended unemployment benefits. This is not your father's Republican Party. This is not even the Republican Party of 5 years ago. I mean, right. George Bush extended unemployment and raised the minimum wage. The Republican Party, I submit, has been destroyed. The Republican Party of Eisenhower that would build roads all over this country is gone. The Republican Party that would protect poor black kids in Little Rock, Arkansas, trying to go to school. It's gone. The Republican Party of today is really an extreme libertarian group who only cares about increasing their wealth and power of the richest people. It's a plutocratic party. So the bottom line is, we need to make that point clear too. That even Bob Dole couldn't exist in this Republican Party. Ronald Reagan couldn't exist in this Republican Party.
He talks about amnesty. I mean, he's called it amnesty, and
they don't want to do nothing on immigration. They don't want to do nothing.
A ban for assault rifles. I mean,
right.
Look at what Ronald Reagan. I mean,
right. Well, they don't
conservative as he was.
So these people, if you're at all conservative, don't confuse real conservatism, which is, watching the money, being careful, making sure that the government doesn't go too far.
Get too
we
big,
get that. We get that. But what we don't get is this: shutting down the government, no action on anything that's meaningful for the American people, named immigration, unemployment, raising the minimum wage, and a whole range of other things. I mean, they literally shut the government down because we were trying to extend health care to Americans who didn't have it. They shut it down for that purpose, and they have lost overwhelmingly. And one of them said to me, the shutdown is 1 million years ago. Really?
Yeah.
I remember it pretty well.
Jeez. Wow.
It's fresh in my mind.
Yeah. American people remember. They're hoping that people forget about it.
Right.
But guess what? They're not going to. Congressman Keith Ellison here with us. So much to talk about, so many questions. 866-55-PRESS. You know how to join the conversation. We invite you to do so. We'll be right back.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on Talker TV. This is the Bill Press Show.
Thursday morning, January 16, 12 minutes before the top of the hour. Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District here in studio with us. All right.
Good to be here, man.
And we got a little breaking news here with the Academy Award nominations being announced.
Literally
Peter
just finished announcing the Best Picture nominees. We'll go through those. Best Picture nominees, Academy Awards.
10 envelope, please.
There are 10 of them, yes. 12 Years a Slave.
Ooh.
American Hustle.
Oh, yeah.
Captain Phillips, which is kind of a surprise. Dallas Buyers Club.
Oh, boy.
Gravity. Her. Inside Llewyn Davis.
Whoa.
Nebraska. Saving Mr. Banks. And The Wolf of Wall Street.
No Philomena.
Although there were several awards for the acting in that movie. That was a snub. I'm not seeing any other big snubs in there. It looks like they got a lot of them, but yeah.
12 Years a Slave is a powerful movie.
Oh, man, that movie's like, it's like a roller coaster. It's visceral. You feel it. It's palpable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, all right. There we go. We got our homework now to see all those movies before the nomination.
Did Scahill get some love?
Scahill, our friend Jeremy Scahill, was nominated for Best Documentary for his movie Dirty Wars, and he just tweeted, by the way, holy
expletive
bleep, and that's all he tweeted.
Yeah.
All right. Go Jeremy. Yeah, powerful book.
Go for it, man.
I usually conduct the interviews here, but Peter has a question for the congressman.
I had to ask. We have breaking news as of yesterday. So the Minnesota Vikings.
The Vikings. Yeah, we got a new coach.
5-10-1 this season. Not a great season.
What happened with that? I mean,
I hate ties.
How do you even do
this?
that?
This isn't soccer. This is football.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Play it out.
They got a new coach, Mike Zimmer. Comes from the Bengals. Defensive guy. Is the defense the problem for the Vikings?
Yes. I think the defense has been the problem, but also our quarterback has been the problem. So if we do something on the quarterback side and we solidify the defensive line and of course the middle. I think we're weak at middle linebacker, and of course we've drafted high for cornerback. We hit one was good. Xavier Rhodes was good. Chris Cook not so much, and we just should put him on waivers and maybe get another good cornerback.
All right. You should have a good feeling about the new coach.
I don't know why they don't let me try it.
I was going to say.
I'm telling you, man, I could do that. I'm sure I could return some kicks, man.
I'm just amazed. All these guys. You're on top of it.
That's why I wanted to ask. You know what you're talking about.
All right, absolutely. I want to ask you back to the boring public policy stuff. Now, we know the numbers on the Affordable Care Act, right? Is health care, Republicans really think they're going to be able to just clean up by running against Democrats on Obamacare this year.
But they've been shockingly quiet this week.
That's true. That's true.
I think they've shifted their tactics. I mean, if you look at the fall, we're gonna kill it, we're gonna shut it down, we're gonna end it. That's it. But now they're not attacking the program. They're sort of like trying to raise questions about the existing program. They've almost conceded the program. What do I mean? So like they have some bill out there that would require that they be like weekly reporting on numbers when every other federal program is reporting monthly. So they just want to like paper them to death and bog them down in tedium. And then the other thing is sort of trying to raise questions around the security of the site. Like, although there have been no breaches, nobody's information has been lost. But they're trying to make people believe that it could be insecure. This is, just an attempt to shy people away. But the bottom line is millions of people are signing up. This is going to be a good thing. I'm high on the Affordable Care Act. I'm a single payer guy, and I was on the elevator with some Republican colleagues of mine who are I'm friendly with. And they were kind of saying, well, they didn't know I was on the elevator, that they just want to do this so that they can push in single payer. And I turned around and I said, you guys say it like it's a bad thing. This is we like it. So, we all had a laugh. But the point is, single payer would be cheaper, better, cover more people. But we got what we got, right? So let's make the most of it. And I want folks out there to remember, the single payer people to remember, in 1964, when we passed the Civil Rights Act, a lot of people were mad not because they were against civil rights, but because they thought it should have voting. They thought it should have fair housing. But in 1965, we did get voting. And in 1968, we got housing. So my point is, never quit.
Right.
Never quit.
And the ACA allows states to experiment with it. And Vermont is just about to do that if they haven't already done so.
I'm going to tell you something. So, if Vermont goes single payer, you will see businesses flock to Vermont because that will alleviate a big nugget from their bottom line and will be a real boon to business and will spark creativity, will spark entrepreneurism. Anybody who's tinkering in their garage will want to be in Vermont because they're going to be the ones who can afford to do it. Minnesota needs to do it too, and the whole country.
All right, you got it. The book is My Country, Tis of Thee. Congressman Keith Ellison, thank you so much.
Thanks,
so
Bill.
Great to see you.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Phillip Longman, Theda Skocpol, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today.